So up first, we have a great guy. His name's Gary Durst. He's going to talk to us about what Springfield is trying to do with the property registration. So let's give Gary a warm Greater Dayton Area welcome. Can everybody hear it?
Hear me okay? Is it okay? You hear me all right? In the back? Good? Not had that problem before. One thing I did see is it ran across here on the Home Depot. A couple things I do up there. We press hard on a 5% match with Lowe's. You may already do that. And that's a big deal to us. And they literally, because we have several people that have our cards, and each person that goes in, every single purchase they make on our card, there's a 5% discount off the shelf price, which is a pretty good deal. But you have to press it, you have to push it. We do it through the commercial sales card. And but if you push it, they will eventually. It takes a little while, but 5% means a lot. The other thing we do have a great deal on is the Menards match. Are you aware of the Menards match on their 11%? When Menards has 11% on, and they've had it now 3 weeks in a row, but with the 11% Menards match, literally, and if you go to the pro sales desk, they have little sheets, and then you end up going online. My wife can tell you more about that, but there's sheets that you fill out, and for every single purchase that I make that week, they match. Home Depot will send me their in-store gift cards for 11% of my purchase. So if I spend $100, then I get $11 back. What I use them for is, I use them all the time, but I also plan on some bulk buys, like if I have a house coming up, anything like that. So just a thing, it's a real big deal. We last year alone, we ran real close to $11,000 just on Menards rebates. So just a plug there for what was on there, and I don't get paid by Home Depot. I think we've already handed out a sheet here. This is a proposed ordinance for Springfield, Ohio. Now it's being changed even as we speak, but it's a crucial thing for Springfield. I don't know if Dayton and Fairborn, I don't know if they have those here already, but for us, the real dilemma comes in on the heels of it is a landlord registry. They have just done a 67-page housing market analysis in Springfield, and they proposed these two things. One is a vacant property registry, and then they've also they want a landlord registry, and that's a thing down the road that we believe, at least in its form, will cost us a lot of money. But currently, this is going on tomorrow night at 5:30 in the city of Springfield. Their forum. We literally have a community input time. If you have time, if you want to come and talk about it a little bit, we'd greatly appreciate it. But I'll try to give you a little bit of an underline here without going through this entire thing. One of the commissioners has said that there's $1 million in Springfield. There's $1 million, and we're like 54,000 strong in the city. But $1 million have been spent to upkeep vacant properties in the last year. And he was pretty incensed about it. He's brought it up, and he's pushing it very strong. And I don't doubt that they've spent that money. The other thing that's on there that is also in this market analysis is that they have a lot of uncollected property taxes. And it's a big, big deal in Springfield, a huge deal. I have met since I just found out about this a week ago Monday. I started meeting on Monday afternoon and Tuesday with the commissioners. I've met with 3 commissioners. I've also met with the city manager, the director of community development, as well as the code enforcement the head of code enforcement. Met with them individually and then had another meeting with those same 3 individuals and with 4 property owners that were in there. And the city manager, they invited those people. They knew who they wanted to have in there. We had a good meeting. Their underlying purpose for this ordinance is, first of all, 24-hour responsible person contact. That's so if there's a burglary or any trespassing, that the law enforcement can get a hold of you if you own that vacant property right away. Their contention is that they let a lot of people go, burglaries, because they can't get a hold of the owners. And so because they won't press charges. The second one is it's for the safety of the first responders, which makes sense. Even the first one makes sense if that really takes place. But first responder safety was the one that rang true with us. And it gives them a current contact information. They can make a phone call. Hey, your house is on fire. We're coming out there. And then the other thing that with this registry it'll do, because you need to fill out every 3 months the condition of your vacant property. And if, let's say, a floor has, a stairway has fallen in or whatever, they will have that information when they go out. And I guess currently in commercial properties, they have that already. So that if they're going out to commercial property, a clerical person will get on they'll pull that up, see what's what, and then they'll forward that to them. So they go out and know, okay, you can't go into the basement, there is no stairway, whatever, that type of thing. So that makes sense. But that's part of their underlying purpose. And then the last one is that they want the current owner information so they can address any code issues. They say that so, and it's true. As you well know, there are a lot of companies, because we've tried to buy them, right? We've tried to buy those vacant properties. You can't find who owns it. But they want the owners. They hide behind LLCs. The hedge funds hold them, and then the absentee landlords, they're out of town, out of the way, they don't care. So, and then part of that is they're saying that will allow them to collect the assessments from code enforcement. It'll allow them with delinquent taxes, that type of thing. Our contention is, will that accomplish what they want? And basically, what we're pushing back on is that responsible owners or landlords will register. If they spent $1 million last year maintaining vacant properties, not a dime of it went to mine. I spent over almost $5,000, like $4,700 on my vacant properties last year. So it's not going to. If responsible owners are going to go, they're going to pay their taxes, they're going to take care of code issues. It'll be the slumlords on down, however you want to put that. And absentee landlords and owners, that they won't register unless they're contacted or threatened by the city, and the city's going to have to require them anyway, because they're going to have to go after them some other way, because they're requiring it. If they don't automatically register, if you're living in Tampa and you've got 3 properties in Springfield, Dayton, wherever it happens to be, you're not even going to know that you're registering. More or less don't care because you've kind of walked away from it. So our contention there is that it's not going to really do what they're putting this in to do. So we've kind of gone through, and again, go through this. I mean, see what you think, because and again, I don't know if you have that here or not, but this its form just does not make sense. In our opinion, I guess our opinion being mostly Linda's and mine, and what we with the other 4 property owners that we've talked about, that first of all, there are current laws on the books that they don't enforce, much like our the whole national political scene. There are laws on the books that aren't enforced. Same way with this, there are laws in the city of Springfield that they need to enforce, such as delinquent property taxes. It amazed me, and I can't tell you the number, but it amazed me the amount of landlords in the city of Springfield that haven't paid property taxes in 5 or more years, which just is absurd to me. If you look at it from a competition standpoint, it's really not a competition for a responsible landlord anyway, but just competition alone. If he's not having to pay the taxes, he's got an edge on me. So so a responsible landlord will be a responsible landlord does 3 or 4 things. He'll be his taxes are current. He'll have a minimum insurance on it, and I don't know how it works here. I know vacant properties are tough to get insured. Our insurance company allows us to put a builder's risk on it when we first purchase them. So they allow a builder's risk, which typically is good for a year, then you can renew it. But the reason is, before adopting that ordinance, let's get some of these things taken care of. Define who a responsible property owner is. He'll have his tax will be current. He'll have insurance on it. He's responsive to code enforcement. He may have a couple on him, but he's working toward them. And the most important thing is that he'll have an intended use plan for the property. It might be, okay, I've just purchased it. It's within my neck of the woods, and I'm going to rehab it within 3 years. So whatever that would be, to have some kind of intended use. And in the meantime, it's become a viable property for the city because they're getting property taxes. They're not having to pay in that $1 million to cut the grass, to do those kind of things. The second person that we think they need to define is the absentee owner or their responsible landlord. So the absentee owner is the guy that's moved to Tampa. He's got a property his mother gave him or whatever, and he just doesn't want it, whatever that is. And then the other one is basically the slumlord, and he's not paying these taxes. So define him, because his real estate taxes are in arrears probably. Code enforcement violations, he's got them all over the place, and there's been no plan put in. He probably has not registered. So if indeed that can happen and you can define them, and locally we think they'll be able to. Locally, if you're renting property in the city of Springfield, I can pretty well tell you I can find out who you are behind the LLC or whatever. I can find that out. And then the last one is, of course, the hedge fund institutions that they buy all these things. They don't even know where Springfield is on the map, let alone what's going on with that property that they have in that hedge fund. Their only goal is to eventually sell at some point. And those last two are where the $1 million are being spent. And so in our opinion, it's just not taking care of its intended purpose. I guess that's really where I'm at. On that, if you've got any questions or anything, what happens from this standpoint, from this point on, is tomorrow night we have a public, just a forum where everybody can come in and talk. Anybody that knows what you're talking about, if you stand up there, they do listen to you. And then on Friday, again, I have a meeting with the city manager, with the code enforcement, the head of code enforcement, and the director of community development, with the other 4 landlords, and we're going to, and their intent at least, and I believe they're acting in good faith, is to write that ordinance then at that point, and we're hoping that it encompasses everything that we've talked about. I'm not sure of the assurance they're going to be able to give us that it's going to bring its intended purpose out completely, but I believe it's going to pass, whatever it is. So I guess at this point, our hope is to get it in as close to the current form, or a form that will work for the responsible landlord, the responsible owner. It's not just landlords. If you own a property, if it's vacant, if it's been vacant for 90 days, you have to register it, and then you have to maintain it. So our hope is that we can at least have our input into it, a professional input that's not just a bureaucrat making some decisions on what sounds good. So with that, any questions I'll take real quick. Yes, sir.
Did they give you any kind of feedback, like when you talked about laws but not being enforced? I mean, like simply collecting the back taxes on these places that haven't paid for 5 years. That seems like a pretty easy thing to start doing, and the word gets around pretty quick when you do that to the people who aren't responsible. I either step up, get rid of the property, do something, or they're coming after me.
Right. We discussed that primarily in the, with the city manager, with the three and the landlords. Pretty good discussion about that. What they talked about was that the current law director, they're just not quite as hard as pushing those, that type of thing, and it really can't be legislated because it's already legislated. So what it has to do, it has to come from an outcry from where it's going to be, and that's I think this can be a big part of that from our end to say, hey, we're doing our part. You're not spending $1 million on my properties, and any responsible land vacant, any responsible landowner is paying his taxes. I don't want the tax man to come after me. Everybody gets in trouble once in a while financially and all that, and they have a very good system in Springfield that if you're behind on your taxes, all you have to do is go in and get with them, and they'll set it up on a 5-year plan. All you have to do is keep your you pay that payment over that 5 years, which is 10 payments every 6 months. As long as you keep your current one paid plus that, you have no problems with them, and they'll work with that. So they've got a system that will work even for those slumlords and the out-of-town guys as far as that goes. But it has to, there's some teeth in the law already, but someone has to apply that. And that's their contention, at least the folks in the meeting I was in, was that they can't do it legislatively, they can't do it as a bureaucrat basically in there. It needs to come from folks outside. It needs to come from us. Hey, wait a minute. I'm paying my taxes, mine's taken care of, so Mr. Commissioner, you're spending $1 million.
Sounds like you need a more proactive law director.
Well, we do. We do as far as that goes. And there are other things. He has other interests. And I can't tell you what those are. I don't know that he's a bad one. I don't know him. But it's been this way for years. I mean, there are folks that are 8 and 10 years. There are properties that come up on the sheriff's sale that are 8 and 10 years with no taxes collected, and that's absurd to me. It should have been forfeited long ago. And they just need to step up to the plate somehow, some way, and cause all those folks to either get into the plan or sell your property or whatever. And if that in itself, I believe, will take care of the vacant property. Because I have 11 properties right now in the city of Springfield. I have a plan for every one of them. My initial plan was for every one of them to be, every time I buy it, would be up and running within a year. But with the whole downturn in the economy and all that, there have been other properties that have come up. Like I've got one property in particular, it's a double, and I bought it initially with them. I bought it with 34 other properties, but it's down the tail end of those property lists. But I've had other opportunities because this is probably a $60,000, $70,000 remodel. If I can buy one for $15,000 and put 15 in it, and I've got it up and running in 6 weeks, that's business that works. But in the meantime, I'm still taking care of my property taxes, and if we have any code issues, we mow the grass on them and all that. So that's the difference, with that. But the commissioner is pushing it. All he sees is the $1 million that's being spent on vacant properties, and they're not defining that. That is one other thing too that we're trying to get them to do, is to define what a vacant property is and an abandoned property, because there's a very distinct difference there. The vacant property, if it's got the plan together, everything the responsible owner will do. Okay, that's a vacant property, and if I want to change that plan, say I've got it set up I'm going to have it remodeled in 3 years, and 3 years comes, then I go in and I talk to them, listen, here's why, and if I give them a good reason, they should be able to extend that. An abandoned property hasn't had anything done to it forever, and if you've tried to buy a property that's an out-of-town owner or in hedge funds, you might as well forget it, and you see that property deteriorate. I mean, we've seen them in Springfield. They're in good shape now. The skeleton of it's good. That's what I like. We'll go in and fix them up. But you give it 2 years of nothing going on, that skeleton's going down here. I'm before long they're being torn down. So there's some really good properties going on. The other part of this whole market analysis that Springfield did is they need low-income housing. And if they will just do something either they incentivize us to buy those properties and fix them up, or they penalize those that aren't doing them and work something that it comes up quicker for us to buy, so we can buy it while the skeleton is still good. Yes, yes, sir.
You might want to look into see if Clark County has, that's what you're talking about, right?
Yes, sir.
If they have a grant, I know Miami County, they have grants they get. Usually it's pretty substantial, several $100,000 a year. And I get calls from time to time from them wanting me to buy properties, and they pretty much pay for the materials of the grant, and you supply the labor cost to rehab a property, and then, but the agreement is that you'll do basically like Section 8 tenant or low income tenant for like 10 years. And it's just not marked where we're in, but I'm just saying you may want to check something out. Clark County may have something similar. You should be community development people who handle all your zoning and development would know if they have that money available. They're called community grant funds or something or other. I don't know what it's called. But.
Yeah, and we have had those, and we've participated in those. There are a couple going on right now, and even with the community development people, they're very important in the overall scope of what's coming up, and they want you to use those. But again, the people that are using those are the responsible landlords, the responsible owners. It's not the slumlords; they can care less. Even we participate in a lot of, they call it Lead Safe Springfield, and it was part of the lead program. You get rid of the lead, and they would give us a tremendous amount of money, and it was just it was a gift to me because we were doing those things anyway. But we had to, like you said, we had to allow people with children under 6 in there, as renters and all that. But that took care of some vacant homes. But there were people that they would give all the money, and they would have had enough money to take care of everything in the remodel process to get rid of the lead, but maybe a couple $1,000, and they wouldn't participate because of that. So there are 2 or 3 things going on right now that are exactly that. But even the community development director says that's not going to do it. That will, and agrees that that's the responsible land property owner that will subscribe to those, and I agree with that because of course the hedge fund guys they're not going to do that, and slumlords. What we want to be able to, in my mind, we want to elevate that slumlord to a responsible owner, and there's some of them out there. We know that, but there are some they're just in there, and all they're doing is collecting it, and they're collecting a little bit of rent, whatever it is. They're not paying their taxes, and when you start to put pressure on them for those things, they'll just abandon those properties completely. That's our contention. But there are some that we know will elevate. They'll come on up, particularly if they're aware of the grants and if they'll do this kind of thing. So. Anyone else? Any other questions? I just invite you to come tomorrow night just for some input, but the real one is going to be next Tuesday at 7 o'clock. And that's when they call it the first reading. The ordinance, the ordinance you have in front of you, there are a lot of these things that we talked through with them. And I'll be around after the meeting if you want to ask any questions on that. But we've talked about quite a few things that were going to be really additional costs to us. But the real show support for us will be next Tuesday, and anything you can have to say to add to that. Next Tuesday, 7 o'clock, is the first reading, and then 2 weeks from that, they will have a second reading, and then that's when they'll vote at that point in time. So, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Yes.
Have you talked to the attorney that helps Ohio REIA challenge different cities across the state? If you won't have the contact information, I'll get that for you.
Please do.
He challenges just about any city. He challenges about 6 or 8 cities, and he won every one of them.
Okay.
So we need somebody like that has a big gun.
Absolutely.
Because you and I, city council don't care. Once an attorney jumps in the picture, they say, oh, watch out. So I'll get you that information.
Absolutely. Sir?
I live in Union City, Ohio, but right next door, or split town, is Union City, Indiana. And for 2 years, they were trying to pass a rental ordinance. And I attended every one of the council meetings and brought up many of the same points that you did. What I learned was that they really had another agenda. They were really going after drugs, and they weren't going to use normal search and seizure types of protocols. And that was my first objection, particularly since they wanted me to let the cops in so that they could do whatever. There were no restraints whatsoever relative to any published standards regarding what they were going to be looking for. I said, well, would it be just like Indianapolis that has 174 different criteria that they do with a compliance rate of 10% right now? Would it be like Milwaukee and the study that was done up there where they just said, forget it, it's a bad idea. So what the law of unintended consequences has resulted in, most of the investors that I know are just taking their money out of town, selling their stuff, and getting rid of it. In the meantime, we have a code enforcement inspector who delights in condemning houses. I mean, it's like a star for her, or a scalp or something. And she's all excited about that. Well, there's a cost in that. The demolition cost, the vandalism potential, and the house just becoming an eyesore because they've got it all ass backwards. There is no granting facility whereby even a low-cost loan, I'd be happy to get a low-cost loan, but they won't do any of that kind of thing. So they're seeing an awful lot of condemned houses, the investment community retracting, and when most cities across the United States, somewhere between 30 to 35% are rental houses. We are the largest investor group in the country. They don't treat us with the kind of respect that we ought to. Richmond, Indiana did something interesting, and that is they created a pool of various criminals that are hopping from house to house to house. Having access to that and working in a cooperative fashion with the police, I'd be kind of in favor of that, because I don't want to rent to somebody who's going to turn the place into a crack house tomorrow. So I think there's ways that they can form some cooperative ventures, but a landlord registration program that can then be used as a targeted kind of thing for people that you get along with them. I don't get along with my guys because I'm there in their face all the time. So I think there could be a cooperative venture, but the registration part, I would really object to that.
Well, a couple things about Springfield, and Springfield has a 52% of the available units are rental units. 52%, there are only 48 owners, so it's even above the norm that you're talking about. I really don't think their agenda is for something else. I don't believe. I believe they're being straightforward. My concern is what happens down the road when that administration changes or those folks change. Will it be someone else that indeed will come in? And that's been a lot of what we've talked about. What are you going to use the reporting forms that we give you? What are we going to use? What are you going to use them for? Are you going to use them to police me? Because you run the numbers on it. They're talking $100 per vacancy. That's not going to hire even a part-time individual to police it. And right now, code enforcement is so overwhelmed, with their just mowing grass, that type of thing. But again, in my opinion, it comes back to those from slumlords down. That's where the cost, is coming from. But yeah, certainly that has been a concern. We talked about it, and I'm not necessarily. I get along with them. You kind of do what you have to do. The first time I've ever called a commissioner on anything was on this issue. If I feel that they're out of place, we talk to them about it, end up doing whatever they tell you to do anyway. But at least they know your thoughts and where you're at. So,
It's a question about the $100. The $100 registration. On one hand, I see about hiring somebody, but on the other hand, if the goal is to decrease the $1 million they're expending, if this is going to succeed, then they're going to save the money on the other end. So what happens if they make it succeed? Now they've saved, let's say, half that $1 million, and now they're collecting an additional $100 per property per year. Now they've turned this into a profit instead of just saving money. I have a problem with that.
yeah, and we brought that up. I mean, that very thing, and the $100 is not going to make the responsible landowner, it's not going to mean Hillby's, and I don't want to spend $100 if I don't have to, but it's not going to do a lot in the end. That's why I said early on, my concern is when the landlord registry comes in, because then you pay the vacancy in between and all that. There's a lot of money that will cost us, at that point. I need to button up. One last question.
You said that they were looking for low-income housing. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, it's the need for it. They're not looking for it necessarily, but it's the need for it because of the income levels, in the city of Springfield, and they're below and near poverty levels and they listed all the percentages, in that. That's a cover in my mind, because there's affordable housing there now when it's through entitlements and all that. We provide quite a few of those, and it's a good system if you handle it right. And from a responsible owner, we do it. We take care. We work with the entitlements. We work as much as you can. But that's one of those things we feel like they're kind of undergirding that with.
Section 8.
Yes, yeah. We've got probably 80 units through Section 8. We get aggravated with them, but it's a program that works for us, and frankly, our standards are usually higher than those anyway. So.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.